Welcome to the show, everybody. Michael with CoronavirusDiaries, and today I'm fortunate enough to connect again with Joe Cebula, a personal trainer and the co-host of the Maximus Podcast. Joe, how are you doing?
I am great, Micah. Good to see you again.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming back on the show. So last time you were on here, after the session, we were kind of discussing a bit about, what do we want to talk about next time? And it's kind of been all over the place. We got something interesting for the viewers this time that's going to be outside of physical fitness. Stick around, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. But just to kind of touch base on what is your profession and your passion with physical fitness, credits and debits. You made this comment. Yeah. Can you dig into this and explain what that's about?
Yeah. So just for the listeners, like Mike and I get, after we're done recording, we sit and chat for a while, and it gets pretty interesting. So I think that's the impetus for today's episode. But yeah, this was something that came up. My co-host Bobby actually writes about this in his book Maximus Body, and it's a concept that we've developed and worked on a lot in recent years. And so the basic idea is that everybody has a fitness account, right? Just like a bank account, you have a certain amount of money in this account, and when you go to do a workout, you're taking money out of that account. So let's say you're going to work out really hard today. It's going to cost you $10 from your fitness account. The next day you show up at the gym, you decide, I'm gonna work out hard again. You got to be able to take another $10 out. The third day you go, take another $10 out. The fourth day you go, you take another $10 out. The fifth day you go, and guess what? Your account is overdrawn, and now you owe money back, right? Now the bank is saying, there's an overdraft fee. So not only have you zero balance in your account, you're actually negative. And this is the path to overtraining. It's like constantly taking money out of the account, but doing nothing to put money back in. And so the thinking is, Monday, you go to the gym and you're going to take $10 out of your account. Tuesday, what are you going to do that's going to allow you to put money back in that account? What are the activities, the things that you can do that actually will help replenish that? Because I'll tell you what, if you go to the gym, you take that money out of the account, and the next day you just sit on the couch all day watching daytime television, eating bonbons, you have done nothing. So that account sits at negative. So what can you do to help put money back in? And that's where the idea of there's no such thing as overtraining, just under recovery comes in. You need to participate in recovery activity. So what does that look like? If you've seen a professional athlete, what do they do after a sporting event? They sit in a bath full of ice.
Yeah, the ice
Why?
bath.
Because that ice bath helps their body recover from the damage that they took during their athletic event. Yeah. It brings the inflammation down. It helps promote better circulation. So if you think about, we're in Minnesota, so you walk outside in the middle of winter, and what happens to your fingers? Right? They start to go numb, right? Yeah. They get cold, they go numb. And it's like all your blood is being drawn into your core. So it's your body's way of saying, like, we got to keep our organs safe and fresh. But when that blood gets drawn into your core, it goes to those organs, and those organs do what? Like, they clean the blood, they take all the impurities out of it, they put all the vitamins and minerals in it, and then that blood redistributes to your entire body. So on an exercise level, you go out and you do a bunch of bicep curls. Well, now your biceps have got all this gunk in there, right? And that's why you get this big pump, right? You feel like your arms will be physically bigger. You can actually measure them.
Is that lactic acid or cortisol, or what is the?
It's a little bit of everything, to be honest with you, right? But that stuff builds up. And so what we need to do is try to encourage the body to bring that fluid out of those muscles. Well, your lymph system that moves those kinds of fluids around doesn't have a pump like a heart. That's your circulatory system. So we need to actually do activity that's going to help bring those fluids out of those muscles, get them back to your core where, again, it's purified, it's cleaned, you get fresh oxygen, minerals, vitamins, everything it needs in there, and then allow that back out. So the idea behind an ice bath is you've got all this inflammation, you've got all this stuff in the muscles that's, causing this chain reaction of like, you're going to need to take a few days off. You go sit in the bathtub, and it draws all that blood into your core. It gets all that pump out of those muscles. And then you get out of the bath, and what happens? Fresh, clean blood goes to all those tissues that need it. And so the healing process is accelerated. That's putting money back into the account. Doing light massage can help pump the fluid out of a joint, out of a muscle, clean it out, put fresh fluid back in, right?
How nice would it be to have a massage therapist at your beck and call?
Yeah, right. But I mean, if you look at the top performers in any sport, what are they doing? Like, they're taking ice baths, they've got a massage therapist, right? Some people swear by yoga. Like, if that works for you, great. But what works for me might not work for the next guy. Like,
I got a question.
Yeah.
As far as the credits and debits goes, the nutrients that are in your body, I've heard a lot of talk about BCAAs, the branched chain amino acids. I'm sure you know a lot about, and that's what I'm hoping to learn about is a lot of times what I've heard, and whether or not it's a sales pitch at the local shop or not, is that people that train heavily, more than just say an average workout, people that are maybe doing 2 days, they can deplete their BCAAs, so then they need to put more in to give you some form of energy. Is there truth to this, or what is this BCAAs? Really?
Right.
Okay.
Branched chain amino acids, it's basically just protein. It's just protein, right? So worst case scenario, this is my official take on branched chains. Worst case scenario, you're just getting a little extra protein, which you probably need anyway, especially if you're working out like that. If you're doing 2 days, you probably are not getting enough protein. It's hard, right? It's hard even for your body to digest the amount of protein that you actually need to repair all the damage that you're doing when you train that hard. So, I mean, it's like expensive protein in the end. If there's any benefit to it, like, I mean, at that level, sure, I'll take what I can get. If I can get a 1% increase in performance, and if that's through a 1/10% increase in recovery, if I can put that extra nickel back into my account, then I can spend that on more fitness down the road, right? So, I mean, maybe it's 100% placebo, but if it gets me that edge, then the placebo is working. You know what I mean?
I think it's like creatine. What are your? I'm interested in your take on creatine.
So creatine is a little different. So when you're doing, especially I want to say like a classic bodybuilding style workout, right? Your muscles are using muscle glycogen. So your body stores about 2,000 calories worth of just energy in the muscles themselves. Okay, so those glycogen stores are there. You go to the gym, you work out, you're depleting that glycogen. So when you're doing like a set of a bench press, you know, and you get like 8, 9, 10, 11, like what are you running out of? The fuel source is being depleted. When it's depleted, you got to rest, allow your body to recoup that, and then you can try to do that again, right? So by constantly depleting that fuel source, forcing your body to refill it, depleting it, forcing it to refill it, what you're doing is you're actually training your body to get more efficient at doing that. And so as you get fitter and fitter and fitter, you're able to do more and more work with less and less rest, because your body is just that much more efficient at replacing muscle glycogen, replenishing oxygen levels, bringing the muscles back to balance more quickly, right? This is why you can't just train one attribute. You can't just train to be strong. You also have to train your aerobic system, because eventually your lack of an aerobic system is why you can't get stronger. You need all of those things to work. So what creatine does is it's basically topping off the fuel tanks. Right? Creatine is what your body is burning in that mode. And so if you can take that shot, 20 minutes before a workout, what you're going to get is, let's say you and I are relatively equal in athletic prowess, and we're going to do a bench press workout, because everybody knows what a bench press is. And we're going to do 5 sets of 5. You take the creatine, I don't. We both go out, we hit a set of 5. Ooh, that was heavy. Same weight, 400 pounds, because, we're struggling.
Of course, yeah.
All right. Do our second set. 5, racket. Okay. We go to the third set. I get 4. Oh, I better racket. Yeah. But you finish. You get that 5th rep because you had that little bit of extra fuel in the tank, right? At the end of the workout, maybe you've done 2 or 3 reps more than I did during that workout. But over the course of a year, I mean, that might be another 100 workouts.
Yeah.
That might be an extra 300 reps at a particular weight. That's the difference that creatine makes. And again, we're talking about percentage points here already on top of a pretty well-rounded program.
Yeah. And this is leading me right into another question I had with training, right? So you're talking about getting your body to a certain state. So your co-host, Bobby, of the podcast, former fighter with UFC, mixed martial artist. There's a UFC coming up this Saturday, first one since all the lockdowns and everything. UFC 249. Tony Ferguson, one of the greatest, made a comment about 12-hour training days. And I'm sitting there and I'm just like, good God, like at a point in my life, I had done 2 days and I would alternate groups, and like, it was a good time for 6 months. I put on some mass and it was wild, but I was limited to what else. Like, it was when I was overseas, I had that to do and clean weapons and sleep, really. But he made a comment about doing 12-hour days, and about, you're talking a 12-week minimum. I think it's 12-week camp. And I'm like, how is it possible? Like, you must have to be just feeding your body like very pristine, balanced amounts of stuff to be able to do that, and then be within, you know, they're doing weight cuts and all that. So it's like it seems like a real science.
I mean, a lot of it is. There is a science to making weight. I consider this more like Japanese sword making than science, which is kind of a funny thing to compare it to. But let me explain.
I like swords.
Yeah, so Japanese swordsmen, when they were making swords, like they were very into what they were doing. It became ritualistic, right? So they knew if they folded the steel so many times, if they let it cook, and what they were doing is they were chanting little incantations, right? They were doing their, was it like Shinto or Taoist incantations that they were doing. And so a certain amount of time would pass, right? So they had the steel in the carbon fire, right? They were throwing wood in the fire. And if they kept it in there just the right amount of time, they knew that sword would come out special. It would come out, you know, with a mirror finish on it or what have you. Like it made the steel better. Different swordsmen would try different incantations, different patterns of doing things. And just over time, they noticed what actions had what benefits to the steel. And you could say, you know, hey, those were the old gods blessing that, you know, and I don't think, maybe this goes into what we're talking about later, either one accurately describes the reality. The sword is better, right?
Sure.
Is that science? I mean, they weren't like, well, on a molecular level, I hadn't know that throwing carbon and fire and blah, blah, blah. None of that mattered. All they knew was that was good steel, right? I kind of lost my train of thought on this when we were talking about the 12-hour training days.
I started to think about the quenching the blade. It's like going into cold water.
So the art of losing weight is kind of like that, where like people have been doing this for 2,000 years. You know what I mean? Like athletic competitions trying to find like a fair balance. Like I don't always want a David and Goliath. You know what I mean? I don't want to have to worry about like, I'm training to be a fighter, but I'm only 130 pounds. There's no way you're going to beat a guy who's 230 pounds. It's just not, it's like.
Unless you're Hoist Gracie going against Ken Shamrock. Back in the day.
But like, but take like a regular human versus silverback gorilla. It's like, their size does kind of come into it. You know what I mean? Like, look, we can both be the best fighters on the planet. We could both be the best drivers on the planet. But if we're going to a demolition derby and I'm driving a tank and you're driving a beat up old hoopty, who's going to win? Doesn't matter how good a driver you are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the car actually does matter. So in the fight, it's the same thing. But over time, trainers, like, they know what you need to do to cut weight. They know the tricks to make sure that on weigh-in, that scale is right where it needs to be. So I think that's a different kind of science. I don't think it's something that necessarily applies to somebody who's, you know, in a healthy manner, like trying to lose weight. It's part of a game that they play. But the other thing that you touched on was like doing 12-hour days. And like, how is that even possible? I'll use the example of Michael Phelps, right? So Michael Phelps has, 27 gold medals or whatever. It's a ridiculous amount. And I've got a calculator here because I'm actually going to do this math as we go. So according to legend, Michael Phelps trains 6 hours a day for 6 days each week. So I'm going to give him the benefit of doubt. I'm going to let him only train for 5. So that's 6 times 5 per week. That's 30. I don't know if you can see that on there. That's 30 hours per week of training times, let's just say 50 hours or 50 weeks a year. And we'll give him 2 weeks off, which he never took anyway. That's 1,500 training hours in a year. Just doing the math right there. And that's probably not accurate. I think most of the reports say it was closer to 1,800. Okay. So similarly now, if we take a normal human being who trains 1 hour, 3 days a week, that's 150 training hours per year. So he's training like more than 10 times what an average person is. And so you come to me and you're like, I want to get in shape. I want 6-pack abs. I want to be able to bench press 400 pounds. I want to deadlift, 600. And I'm like, okay, how frequently can we get you to the gym? And you're like 3 days a week, guaranteed. Like, okay, for how long? Like for an hour. Like, okay, we can't expect you to win, 20 gold medals at the next Olympics. You just can't. You have to be able to put that amount of work in. But this goes right back to what we started this with, which is this credits and debits. So if all you've got is $50 in your fitness account when you show up, then you can take 10 days or $10 out 5 days in a row before you hit zero balance. You can do it. It's not smart, right? But what's better is if you take $10 out today, put $10 back. Take $10 out the next day, put $10 back. just like building credit on a credit card, right? Let's say this is actually a good financial tip for your listeners. Say you went through a bankruptcy or you're trying to build credit, right? You get yourself a secured credit card. You give the bank $150 and they give you a little piece of plastic with a $150 limit on it. And what you do is the first of the month, you go buy a cup of coffee and that's all you buy on that card. That's it. You spent $3. When that bill comes due, you pay it. 3 months later, they extend your credit limit, right? You continue to do the same thing, they extend your credit limit. So similarly, you keep showing up at the gym, you keep taking money out and putting money back in, you show responsible use of your credit, you go from a $50 limit to a $150 limit, from 150 to 15,000. You know what I mean? And now you're at like this Michael Phelps level where over time you have gotten so good at replenishing that account that your balance is extended and you can actually train hard 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, 52 weeks a year, because you're dedicated to what that's going to do. Now, is there a cost to that? 100%. There's nothing healthy about that. Okay. That dude's metabolism is shot. He's going to spend the rest of his life in like hormone therapy and on insulin. Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't live off of like 12,000 calories a day for how many years without your body adapting to that. And so to go from that to trying to be like, yeah, I eat 2,000 calories a day. Like, how does your body even manage that change? Like at an internal molecular level, like shit has to change. And you can't maintain that forever. You know, eventually your joints are going to wear out. You know, your muscles are going to tear. Eventually things have to stop. You're aging, for crying out loud. Like, we have to be realistic. Yeah. So the credits and debits will get you to a point where, like, instead of training 150 hours a year, maybe you can train 400 hours a year. Maybe you can train for a short time, 12 hours a day for a couple of weeks. But I guarantee he's not training hard 12 hours a day because it's honestly counterproductive at that point.
You start atrophy. And
if you want to be a great fighter, how important is your deadlift?
I don't know that I can only imagine. I've never trained to do any of that, but I can imagine it might be an aspect of a training regimen, but I think they would be focusing more on the act of fighting as opposed to.
If you want to be a better fighter, spend more time fighting, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what matters. You know, there's no research that shows that the guy with the heaviest deadlift has won every fight, or I guarantee that's all they would be doing. Deadlift would be the measure of everything. And I know a lot of powerlifters who think that, but that it's not, unless you're a powerlifter, that's not that important. You know, is an offensive lineman and an NFL team pretty strong? Yeah. I guarantee they're really strong. Are they the strongest human beings? Like, I mean, they're up there. But I think like Thor Bjornsson can probably lift more weights than these guys because that's what he does. But how important is your bench press as an offensive lineman? Like, you got to be good at it, but like, it's not the be all end all. Otherwise, the guy with the biggest bench would be unstoppable, and that's not the case, right? So if you want to be good at a thing, you got to spend your time doing that thing. And that doesn't always have to be grueling. Like, you don't have to be in full contact fights for 12 hours a day. But my guess is he's probably training very, very well-rounded. He's doing some aerobic conditioning because, again, as a fighter, you need that system to be primed because you got to really have that recovery. And that actually doubles as recovery. So when you get to a certain level, going for a run for an hour at an easy pace is recovery.
Yeah.
If you've never run before, that's a workout. So again, you've got to build that up. And some of these activities can kind of cross the boundary a little bit. So I guarantee he's doing some long cardio. He's probably doing some kind of like HIIT stuff because that's very like round sensitive of like, can you go hard for a short term, recover quickly, go hard, recover quickly. It's just like a fight where you got to go hard for 3 minutes, rest for one, hard for 3 minutes, rest for one. I guarantee he's doing a lot of like technique work. And yeah, I mean, it's probably like low level cardio all day long. He's probably moving and doing things. He's probably also eating a shit ton of food. And again, there's a payday at the end of that. Now, this is interesting. You adjust that payday and you give him like what most guys get, like $500 for fighting one night in a seedy bar in like Waterloo, Iowa. Like, he ain't training 12 hours a day for that. It ain't worth it. You know what I mean? But you put a big enough payday at the end, the guy who trains more is more likely to win. And that's kind of where that comes from. And again, that kind of wraps up the credits and debits as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's great.
You take money out, put money back in. If you're responsible with your credit, you can do more.
That's great. Regarding the credits and debits, though, with age, I'm willing to bet that there's some sort of a force multiplier to what the debits are in terms of what you do and how.
Yeah, but there's another aspect, right? Because I see this all the time. People are like, oh, once you turn 40, it's all downhill. I heard that when I turned 30. Once you turn 30, it's all downhill. You can't do nothing anymore. It's impossible to have a six pack. And now it's 40. I'm going to be 42 this year. And now everybody's telling me, nope. So when you hit 50, it's all, you can't train like that anymore. And it's like, you keep breaking these barriers. So here's the thing is, am I, as an athlete, as a physical being, am I getting smarter as I age? Because I sure hope I am. I sure hope that I'm not getting dumber, right? If I'm doing things correctly and I have an open mind and I'm paying attention to what I'm doing, yes, my physical capacity to recover is diminished from when I was 19 years old. When I was in college, like I could go out drinking till 3 a.m. on a Friday night and be up at 8 a.m. working a physical job the next day and be fine.
Yeah.
I have a beer now. I need 2-3 days to recover. It's very different. Okay. That's part of aging, but I'm also smarter. I'm not interested in doing the things I did when I was 19, like my whole life is different now. And
21,
so I was in college. It's a different time back then.
Yeah. Right.
Rules. There's a time and a place for that. It's called college. In any case, but I think not only like physically do you need to continue to grow, but like psychologically, mentally. You have to understand, like, what's the purpose of training? When I was in my 20s, it was about fighting. I was a Taekwondo fighter. It's all I cared about. I wanted to go to nationals. Now that doesn't hold much sway for me. So what am I training for? What's my goal? What's the purpose, right? How strong do I need to be? Do I need to be the strongest human being on the planet? Like, probably not. Again, if I'm trying to win like world's strongest man, that's exactly my goal.
Right.
I'm not there. I'm not interested in that. That doesn't motivate me. Like, so I have to make sure that my training has an end and that end is appropriate for I guess what I want out of my life. I don't want to be training to chase somebody else's dream. I need to be doing what I need to be doing because I like it. And what I've found personally over the years is I love the process. I love the process of training. I love the way it feels when I go in on certain days and train certain attributes. I love experimenting with different accessory exercises and kind of giving those time to sort of cook and change me and see how that affects other things that I do. So for me, that's what it's all about. And it makes sense because I'm a trainer. And so if that's what interests me, and then you present yourself with like your own set of problems, and I'm thinking like, well, yeah, like I've experimented with this. I've kind of understand how that process works and how these different exercises can work. And you're just super impatient, like most people are, because they want it now. They want it today. And I can say, look, this is going to take 6 weeks. You got to do these accessory exercises and these main lifts and these kinds of training programs and give it 6 weeks. And then we can kind of adjust course for you. And now I'm speaking from a position of authority. So obviously there's a benefit to that in my field. If I was an accountant and I'm telling you about training, I mean, take it with a grain of salt, right?
That's outstanding. I'm just thinking about the aspect of credits and debits and just how it plays a role in. So the first of the year comes around, and there's typically, if you've ever been in a gym, you'll notice that the number of people that start filtering into the gym dramatically increases. But within a month, certainly by 2 months, the population of the gym is pretty much back down to what it was, tail end of the year, October, November. And just this idea of people wanting results so fast that, they'll reach out to the creatine and the BCAAs and the protein, and they start dumping all this stuff on. And then when they don't get these results, the six-pack results, which is all the advertisements and like the jacked guns, that they'll start looking at it going like, well, maybe it's because the excuses would come in, right? I'm almost 40 years old. I can't put on mass. I don't heal as quickly.
Well, this is human nature though, right? This is like looking at a guy who's in his 40s and has six-pack and being like, well, he's just genetically gifted. Bobby tells this story the best, right? Because he's this big jack dude. We're the same age. I think our birthday's 2 weeks apart in September. And people are like, well, it's just your genetics. And it's like, you never met, like his dad died when Bobby was like 18, 19 of like congenital heart issues. And he was not like a fit person. You look at his mom, like she's not a super fit person. I look at my parents, like not athletes, not really. My dad is
blue collar workers.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like just kind of typical Midwestern beer guzzling, golfaholic, Packer fans. Like that's what they were, meat and cheese. Like that's life. So no, I don't think that genetics is the be all end all. Now, are there people out there who are definitely genetically gifted? Oh yeah, I've met some of them, or their dad was an Olympic level sprinter and their mom was an Olympic gymnast and they're just incredibly athletic. Well, no shit.
Yeah.
Like, of course, like that makes sense, but they still got to work at it. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't discredit how hard they're pushing to get to that next level. And that doesn't mean like everybody who's got great genetics is also a phenomenal athlete. Like, it doesn't always play out that way. So is it a factor? Sure, but it's not a reason not to try. I think even with shit genetics, you could still improve yourself,
Yeah. I mean, I think, what is the name of that? It's a dude that became a Navy SEAL, but prior to that, he was really obese, did like this massive death march, like shattered he had like broken bones and stuff by the time he finished it. I'm blanking on the guy's name. Amazing story though, but he was talking about, it all goes to mindset. You can have a really slow metabolism. It comes with discipline. What are you putting into your body? It comes to the consistency. Are you maintaining?
I think there's a trap in that too, because then you get into this idea of like, you just have to want it bad enough. And it's like bullshit. Like, we all want to look good. We all want to be sexy. We all want to be attractive to other people. That's not a question, right? The real issue is it's all the bullshit that you put in your own way. Yeah. It's all the self-imposed limitations that say things like, well, I can't afford a trainer, or you know what? I can't do that kind of diet, or my favorite, that there's a secret that all the Hollywood trainers have that they use with actors and actresses that you have to pay millions of dollars for. None of that's true, man. Like, seriously, show up and do the dang work. And I've been saying that for years and people still don't believe it. And then they hire me as a trainer, and guess what I make them do? Show up and do the dang work. And guess what happens? They get fit. It's the weirdest thing. How does that happen? What was the secret? You know what I mean? And it's like, it's mostly just somebody has to remind you on a day-to-day basis that this is something you've committed to, because it isn't going to happen in 30 days. Hell, it ain't going to happen in 12 weeks. Yeah. I made an amazing transformation in 12 weeks, but like, that was all in. And when you look at what I did on a day-to-day basis and what I sacrificed during that time, like, well, no kidding, I made that kind of a progress, you know? But if you give yourself an hour a day, 5 days a week, you can make an incredible transformation in 6 months, no less.
That's what I've noticed for myself. It's usually like, if I stray from the fitness routines of like lifting and doing cardio, say I go a couple of months without doing anything, I go back to like my average really, really fast. But when I go back into it, obviously you want to take it a little bit slower. So my turnaround is usually about 45 days of doing, like, I'll start off. It's funny, man, because in the gym, you'll get the looks of like, how much weight are you lifting, right? How much are you curling? How much? So I'll go in there and a lot of the stuff, it'll be just a bar. It's like just to get the form back down, to get my muscles thinking about it. The thing I hate the most is like going really hard after being out for a long time on leg days and then not being able to walk for 4 or 5, like for real. And then you don't want to go back in. So just to actually get back to a point of being able to start putting plates on and start pushing yourself past that, the lightweight high reps, it's 45 days for me. So takes that just to get there. And then
it is like riding a bike. Like, your body remembers how to get in shape if you've ever been in shape. And so, and that's good and it's bad. It's good because you'll see pretty quick progress if you were super fit and then let yourself go, versus if you're trying to build fitness for the first time. Yeah. It can be a very different experience. But the trap there is it means that people who were once really fit are also most at risk, because they mentally
of injury or
mentally they think they can go a certain intensity, but physically they're not there yet. And so they know what pain feels like. They know how to push through. And it's like, sometimes you don't want to push through. There's a big difference. If I've got like a 5-year history of intensive training and I show up for a workout today and I know I need to push myself, like I got to go into a very dark place and I got to push all the negative voices out of my head. And I really got to focus to get to work because it's going to challenge me. Yeah. Versus it's your third day at a boot camp and you got some guy yelling at you about like, you got to go to your dark place. You got to throw yourself on the fire, maggot. He's like, spraying in the face of the hose and kicking sand in your face.
As you're chugging pre-workout.
Yeah. It's like, guys, it's day 3. This person just needs to like, maybe learn how to do a sit-up, let's start simple. Yeah. But that goes to this whole other thing, which is like your mind creates your reality. So in your mind, if you already see yourself as I'm fit, I'm successful, I'm able to do X, Y, and Z, there's nothing limiting you from getting to that point. But if in your mind, you see yourself as a guy who's like, I can't bench press 225. Well, of course you can't. And
Right.
you're going to find all sorts of ways to sabotage yourself as you get there. So even if you do show up, you're like, well, 225 is really heavy for me. So I'm just going to start with 45 and I'll just bench that and I'll be satisfied. And it's like, now you're selling yourself short because you're capable of a 300-pound bench. You're probably capable of a 400-pound bench if you're really focused on it, but that's just not that important to you. And so get in there and don't be, well, I don't want to say don't be intimidated by the weights. Like, understand your intimidation. You know, the first time you bench 225, it's like the greatest thing on earth. Like, holy cow, I reached this benchmark. But if it's the 10,000th time you've benched that, you don't even give a shit about 225 anymore. And you got to understand that that's going to happen at every new weight that you lift along the way. If it's your first day at the gym and you get pinned under a 45-pound bar, but then one day you bench it one time, like, wow, that was the greatest day of my life.
Fair enough.
But then the next day, guess what you do? You bench it again. And the next day you hit it again. Like, now it's just something you do every day and it's not even impressive anymore. So you have to keep adding that extra stimulus, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm realizing that we went pretty deep on the credits and debits, which I'm all about it. I'm a little concerned. Do you think if we go down the other route, is it going to be too much?
I don't know. I think we can keep going. I think I kind of, this is a good segue because I do think your mind does create your reality. And the conversation we started having earlier had a lot to do with different conspiracy theories that are around. And
yeah, it's a lot of what's going. It's a lot of what's going around in media right now, and whether either side of the aisle you're on, I think everybody's seeing now, maybe it's because of the forced lockdowns where people are they're grasping out for anything, like what the heck, but going on 6 weeks, 7 weeks of lockdown.
And maybe people just have too much time on their hands, and they're finally reading websites they probably shouldn't be reading.
There's a lot of stuff. We were just briefly discussing all the different types of, whether you want to say it's a conspiracy theory or whether it's events that have taken place that have some sort of evidence, but how are they grounded? Who's reporting on it? Who's sharing the information? We just started talking about that a little bit, and I kind of pitched out a little thought about, where do you stand with the conspiracy theories of like some deep, like a deep state, or like some ominous hand that's controlling parts of the population, or some sort of global entity that is controlling.
Here's the thing. We have to put this stuff into perspective, right? Because this really, all human phenomenon is psychological phenomenon at a certain level. And I think what conspiracy theories latch onto is the dichotomy between two worldviews. Worldview one is that we are an anomaly, that there was this big bang. We maybe will never be able to identify it, and all these chemicals formed, and out of this chemical sludge, eventually human beings evolved, and here we are. And this is all a huge accident. Nobody is in control of this. There's no reason, there's no rhyme, there's no intelligence behind it. That's one worldview. The other worldview is that there is some level of intelligence that's driven this, whether it was the creation of the world or just our society in general. At least something is in control. Within that worldview, there's two worldviews. One is that is a benefit. We've got this all-loving God who's in charge of everything, or that intelligence is not all-loving, in which case it's usually very malignant towards us and very controlling, right? But both of those worldviews at least mean there's a purpose, there's a reason, there's an intelligence behind what's going on in the world. Because if you go the other route and you're looking at I'll throw his name out there, Donald Trump, and you're like, how did this guy ever get freaking elected? What are his qualifications? My neighbor would be a better president than him. This means like nobody is in control of anything. Right. This means that the distance between like me and the billionaires is way more level than I'm probably comfortable to admit, right? If there's an invisible hand, well, of course somebody's keeping me down. Of course somebody's using me to help elevate someone else. And even though that sucks, it at least means there's some meaning into what's going on. And so I feel like conspiracy theorists, they need to find that meaning And they need to latch onto it because the idea that nobody's in control is so incredibly terrifying that they refuse to even entertain that, even though it's probably closer to our reality.
So it's like it's very similar in nature to training mindset. And
Yeah.
if you believe,
Well, think of this. This is one of my favorite quotes. I forget who said it, but if you stare deep enough into the abyss, it stares back.
Yeah.
You know, if you go down this road where, like, let's just come up with something ridiculous. You know what? One of my favorite internet conspiracy theories right now is that the birds serve the bourgeois. Have you heard this?
No, I'm interested.
Birds are not real. Birds are actually mechanical robots that were sent out by the government to spy on people.
Well, is this, so, and I'm just playing devil's advocate. Are they suggesting all birds, or are they suggesting that there is a bird that is a robotic?
As far as I understand it, it's all birds are suspect, but you shouldn't trust birds. And that prior to like 2010, birds didn't even exist, and they just convinced us that they've been around all along. This is a really deep theory. But if you latch onto something as ludicrous as that, and it even goes against your own life experience, you can start convincing yourself of it. You can really start to see evidence of that being true, right? If you're on the flip side of it and you're like, no, that's bullshit, all you're going to see are arguments against, you know? Yeah. It's that whole thing. If like all you have is a hammer, everything in the world is a nail. It's like, this is my solution to everything. It's all I've got. So I have to find problems that fit my solution. It narrows your view. I use this with negative self-talk. If you surround yourself with people that constantly tell you you're going to be a failure, you're going to suck, you could never be rich, you could never be powerful, you know, there's no way you're going to rise above that. You know, that talk gets into you and you start putting those barriers in front of yourself and you make it impossible to get out of that. If you cut all of that crap out of your life and you surround yourself with people who are like, I don't know why you're not the president of the United States. You know what? You're capable of raising that amount of money. Like, you start to believe that. And the next thing you know, you're running for Senate or becoming the president or what have you. It's like, it shouldn't be surprising. So if you want to believe that this COVID thing is, you know, produced in a lab and some government had some plan about the world economy, like, obviously some people are definitely benefiting from this. You know, these billionaires getting these bailouts aren't suffering.
Leave no opportunity wasted kind of scenario. Whether it was natural or man-made, they're just monopolizing on a circumstance.
Exactly. So I mean, if you're trying to make sense of the world, that's one way to do it. I think in the end of the day, what does it change? You know, you were saying earlier, if we lived in a simulation and you realized it was a simulation, what would you do about it anyway?
Right.
And this is what I would say, like, no matter what you figure out, no matter what great philosophical truth you arrive at, like, you still got bills due, man. So like, you still got to go to work on Monday.
I want to bend this towards in a little different direction, and we don't have to go too far down this path. Right. But let's say that I think we could both agree, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we could both agree that on Earth there is good people that have the best intentions for those around them, and even people they don't know. And then there's the others that are looking to get something or take something or control something. Maybe you can call it good and evil, or, you know, but in the world there is kind of this yin and yang of sorts. If you are aware of like darkness or the evil and don't try to do anything because of the thought, you know, who am I but one person in a sea of 7.6 billion? Like, they'll just the proverbial they will just come after me. They will silence me. They will make me disappear. So if I don't necessarily know the right answer. I don't know the right answer for this. That's why I'm asking your own thoughts. But if I look at some things, you know, for example, there's some stuff that's coming out about vaccines with Gates and, you know, their deployment. I mean, I look at it two ways. One way is that, you know, if these however many thousands of women and children didn't get that, you know, would there be a potential for like a worse outcome than the number of people that did actually die from this vaccine? It's a big thing that's rolling around in the kind of the undercurrent right now with vaccines. And, you know, some people like to latch onto the fact that it killed people. And it's like, well, you know, in the States, vaccines kill people sometimes too. And I think there was the incident that happened out in Oregon with all these kids that hadn't been vaccinated, and it just went like wildfire. And, there's this thought that, well, basically, if you don't want vaccines, you shouldn't have to be forced to it. And then if stuff like that happens, then you're the one that, you take the heat as opposed to the other people, because if
so you're posing an interesting philosophical conundrum here. I'm going to tell you right now, do you know where Alpha Centauri is?
And it's over there somewhere, right?
Yeah, it's like, let's say, in outer space. Well, there's I'm going to tell you, this is true. There's a planet that orbits Alpha Centauri, very much like Earth. And on that planet, there's some shady shit going on. There's some bad dudes doing bad things to good people. Are you now responsible for that just because you know it?
Yeah, that's the question, right?
The answer is there's nothing that can be expected of you. What you're responsible for is what's directly in front of you, right? So if you're in a situation,
your family.
Yeah, I mean, your family, your friends, the human beings that are directly in your life are the ones that you can assume responsibility for. Knowing that there's some crazy shit going on in Africa doesn't make me responsible to fix it. Now, do I feel compelled? Yes, because I'm a good person. I'm not a piece of shit, right? I don't want that stuff to happen.
Yeah.
Right. So when I have the capacity to take action, that is definitely going to influence that. If it really bothers me, what I can start looking at are what are some possible avenues that I can to do something about that. But what ends up happening is you start realizing, like, I'm spending so much time and energy trying to fix this problem that isn't really my responsibility, that I'm ignoring all the people who are right in front of me. And so you have to be able to stop and refocus and say, look, what is important to me right now here today that I can control? There was this guy like 2,000 years ago, and he said, like, the evils of today are enough for today. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about yesterday. Like, focus on today. Focus on right now, because that's what you can control. That's where your decisions have value, right? Yeah. So a friend of mine made a film recently, and it was this lovely film. He was invited over to India to do some ice climbing. Nice. Did this video with these guys, was able to bring a bunch of equipment that these guys couldn't get a hold of. There was a whole misadventure about it because, like, the flights and the shipping, and
of course,
it was like 12 hours north of the nearest airport. Like, so it almost comes across like the screwball comedy, but it's also very inspiring about these guys trying to build an industry up, and how bringing these resources really was a game changer for them. And it helped build this whole festival that they were creating in the Himalayas. Just found out recently that there's another gentleman who is a sponsored athlete by a major corporation who's now bad-mouthing this project because it's like, white saviorism. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, these white guys are going to come in and save these indigenous people. And it's like, that's not the film at all. They were invited over there. They brought what was requested. They helped these guys put it on, and they're barely even in the film, to be honest with you. The guys putting on the festival, the indigenous people he's referring to, they have more screen time and a bigger voice. But this guy's using this as a platform to, like, slander other people's names and say, like, only white people, colonialism, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, it's so negative and it's so bad. So what do I do about it? Do I go on Instagram and start sending this guy DMs explaining, like, did you even watch this film? Like, you're so far off base. What am I going to achieve by having that kind of conversation other than just riling myself up? And now I'm pissed off and I'm angry, and my daughter comes in because she wants a hug, and I'm like, get out of here. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So it's like, I'm not necessarily responsible for that man's worldview. He's just freaking wrong. You know what I mean? He's so off base. And I don't like the fact that, like, he's attacking somebody that I actually have deep respect for. But that's a reflection on that other guy. You know what I mean? It's not a reflection on me. It's not a reflection on anything else. I'm not responsible for his actions. He's an idiot. And I can just write it off and be done with it at that. And again, I can go on Amazon and I can leave a positive review, and I can share my positive experience. And hopefully that has more sway than some guy with a even much larger social media following than he probably deserves, doing a whole campaign against this thing. Right. And then what's interesting is I do go to do that because, again, I'm a decent human being and I'm trying to do the right thing here. And I'm reading the reviews. There's one negative review, one. And there's like 30 very positive 5-star reviews because people don't like that negativity at all.
You try to please everyone, you'll please nobody. And so
again, like, you can know that there's all kinds of goofy stuff going on, but when you start going down these conspiracy theories, like, are you actually chasing something real, or are you being distracted from something much more important? And like, at what point do you let that obsession overtake you? And I think that's the draw, is that desire for knowledge, that desire for gnosis. There is someone in charge, and I know who it is. And maybe they'll give me a piece of the action, or maybe I can take them down, and then I can create my own new world. Or like, that's all flub. Forget about it.
Pretty heavy duty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then again, if the world actually, if that doesn't exist, if there is no Illuminati, and you've convinced yourself that there is, you're a lunatic.
Yeah.
You know, there is no way out of that for you. And so take action when you can take action. You know, think about when you're going to cast a vote, think about the implications of that vote and do the best you can.
I like
you know, and if you find out somebody that you elected is going against something that you believe, write them a letter and tell them. You know, like there are things that you can do, but in the end, I'm not responsible for everybody else on the planet and everybody else's life. I got to just take responsibility for me and for the person in front of me. You know what I mean?
Like the focus locally, you know, what is, like, what can you actually do? Because I've for a long time, I've typically followed, or I try to follow kind of what world happenings with conflict in foreign countries and what's going on. And there's always something wild, like epically huge, that you're just like, how can there possibly be 1 million people starving right here? Or how can this atrocity be happening? But if you start taking steps like reverse engineering it, you're like, okay, what am I going to do? Wait, you know, like, yeah, you can create like campaigns, or you can create initiatives. But that's, again, locally. So it's,
well, let me ask you this question. Do you know your neighbors where you live right now?
So the building I moved into at the start of the lockdown. So I can say I know a few, but it hasn't been like a, hey, let's go knock on neighbors' doors thing.
Yeah. So think about that though. I mean, even in most neighborhoods in America, people don't really know the people in their own neighborhood. Yeah. And like, why are you taking responsibility for shit that's happening in, like, say, Hong Kong, which I think is important to be aware of and important to follow? You don't even know the person who lives next door. The person who lives next door might just need like a loaf of bread that day. And you're like, well, I was going to throw one out, but I can give it to him. But you're so focused on something else. Like, I think you're right. I think you do need to focus more locally. You need to know more about what's going on in your town, you know, in your county, in your state, then in the nation in the world. Yeah. And it can be overwhelming, sure. But that's why I'll tell you what, you want to improve your life, stop watching network news.
Yeah.
Just
stop.
I would agree. And just pay attention to the world around you. Because if you find that you've wandered into a war zone, you're going to take a different set of actions and a different set of choices than if you're walking through like a nice Minnesota neighborhood where things are actually pretty okay. You know what I mean?
Social distancing at its finest.
Yeah.
Yo, I really, really enjoyed this conversation, both from the physical fitness side of things, mindset, and then the little bit of dabbling.
It all comes from the gym for me, man. Like, this is what I think about when I'm under that barbell.
That's great, man. I mean, you're showing the epitome of focusing locally. Is, you know, first focus on yourself, your friends, your family, and then from there.
It's weird. It all starts there. You know, you start taking care of yourself, and then all of a sudden you're more capable of taking care of the people around you. You're more useful to other people.
Well, it's like the Maximus Podcast. You know, you guys.
That's the whole premise of that show.
Yeah, the bigger the network you build, the more people that you're able to, you know, influence and help, the more that they're able to influence and help others. And then it's been really cool watching your platforms grow. So
thank you for that.
Thank you, as always, for coming on here. I know you didn't have to, but it's been a blast and a pleasure.
It's always fun, man. Of course.
Yeah.
Love doing
for all the viewers and listeners, be sure to check out all of Joe's information will be down below, and you can check out what he's been up to and working on. Joe, is there anything you want to touch base on before I let you go?
Just check out the podcast. We've had so many amazing guests lately. The conversations we've had around the COVID-19, about how different businesses, different people are reacting to it. It's been incredible. I mean, we've had people from the Food Network. We'd have famous actors. We had a professional wrestler of some renown. Check it out. It's a lot of fun, and it's eye-opening, and it's fun. It's enjoyable. So there you go.
Maximus Podcast. Check it out down below. Thanks again, Joe. Viewers and listeners, stick around. We'll have more of this stuff coming at you later.